Yesterday, the Pretoria High Court ruled that load shedding is unconstitutional and a violation to human dignity. It also ordered Electricity Minister Ramaphosa to ensure that schools, hospitals, clinics and police stations are exempt from rolling blackouts as early as January 2024. The presidency says it's studying the judgment. For more on this discussion, we're joined by energy expert Professor Sampson Mamphweli. Prof, good to speak to you as always. Now, let's talk about how the ruling impacts the future imposition of load shedding.
Good evening to you and the viewers. The ruling is basically in line with what government was planning to do. Because when the president announced the appointment of the Minister of Electricity, top of the agenda was for the minister to look at how best those kind of establishments can be shielded from load shedding. At some point, Eskom has run some pilots where they isolated some of the hospitals and police stations, but in that process, they end up isolating communities and businesses that are in that vicinity, which becomes kind of unfair to the rest of society. So the modalities around that, the technicalities around that is what the government needs to establish. However, the easiest way of doing it is to install backup systems in these particular establishments. We've got big batteries, storage facilities that can be installed with the inverters, so that during load shedding, those establishments can then continue to have electricity. We've got backup power generators that can be installed in these particular establishments as well. Some of them, if you look at big hospitals, they've got big solar sunroof spaces where they can install solar PV systems. So it can be done. It needs a budget. The problem is the timeline, in my view. Between now and the 30th of January, I can't see government being able to run a process that includes procurement of these particular systems that I've spoken about to an extent that they can be in place by the 30th of January. I think government needs to write to the court and ask for an extension, or buy some time by appealing the judgment. And so that while they're waiting for the judgment to be looked over again by the courts, they will be then busy implementing these particular programs that I've alluded to.
Well, Professor, you suggest that government has capacity to install backup generators or backup facilities in schools, hospitals, clinics and police stations. Now, this would obviously be the responsibility of Eskom, which we know is broke. Is this practical? It's arguable that government would be able to do this. Never mind the fact that they've been asked to do it in January. But even if they were given 24 months, do they have the money? Do they have the capacity to do so?
Yeah, in terms of the financial resources, if government goes back to the declaration of the national state of disaster that they once declared, they can unlock some form of funding, and then they can direct that funding to this particular project. In terms of capacity to implement, we need to look at government in its totality. Government has got various entities. We've got entities such as Sanedi, where I'm seated, where I work from, which is a government entity with capacity to manage large-scale projects. We've got other entities within government that can establish project management offices and run with those particular projects. I can give an example of the pilot that we did at Bizana Police Station through the Department of Science and Innovation. We installed a solar PV system and a battery energy storage facility at that particular police station. The last time I checked, they were not even tapping into the power line that was coming from the municipality into the police station. And we're planning to install a hydrogen fuel cell in that particular police station.
And
so
what
the
cost,
systems
Professor?
are there, the know-how is there as well.
What was the cost of that installation?
So the cost of the PV system was somewhere in the region of 200,000 rands, if I remember well from the top of my head. I can't remember the exact figure to the latter, but it can be done and it's possible, and it's there, it's working. It's not something that we still speculate about.
So in your suggestion, you've done a rough calculation of just how much money would be required for government to put in these provisos, if you will. So whether it's solar or backup generators in hospitals, clinics, police stations, and schools around the country. I mean, that seems like a huge amount of money.
If you look at the cost-benefit analysis and the cost per watt peak, it's not a lot of money because it depends on the amount of energy that you want to provide in that particular space. Some of these establishments will need cheaper systems. In some of them, you may not even put in solar PV. You may just put the backup inverters. And we've done so many of these backup inverters around the country in various of our projects. You know, at Masia Village, for instance, we've done a 20 kilowatt peak rooftop PV with a battery backup system as well. And the cost was not that astronomical. So the cost depends on the amount of energy or amount of power or that you need for that particular establishment. And if you look at the payback period, it's anything between 3 and 4 years. So from year 5 onwards, you basically using free electricity up until year 20 to year 24. Depending on the life of the systems that you've got on the roof and inside the establishments. So it can be done, in my view, in terms of putting up these backup systems, solar and battery energy storage, as well as the generators, for instance.
All right, let's shift focus a little, Professor, and go to the obligations of the electricity minister and what he's been charged with by the courts, and that's to ensure that by the end of January 2024, that schools, hospitals, police stations are not load shed. Is this practical?
It is, given the resources, it is very highly practical, but the timeline is what I'm worried about. I don't think it's practically possible for government to implement any program that can shield these establishments from load shedding by the 31st of January. Even if it means they use the existing grid, what they will have to do then is to intensify load shedding in other areas, and then ensure that in those particular areas where these establishments are located, there is no load shedding, which goes back to the fact that I was mentioning, to say it becomes unfair to the rest of the citizens because they are load shedded and others are not load shedded. So for me, what needs to happen is either load shedding needs to end in the country by the 31st of January across the country, which is not possible looking at the numbers that Eskom has released. As load shedding will still be here way into 2024, maybe 6 to 8 or 10 months, depending on what happens when we enter 2024. Or those establishments need to have backup power systems, your batteries and your inverters and your diesel generators. And those, the diesel generators side of things, they cost a lot of money. So the budget needs to come on board. I don't know. I don't think government has got enough money to be able to spend between now and 31st of January and implement all these programs unless they work with the private sector and the international donors.
That was my point. Professor, as always, appreciate your time. That was energy expert and head of Energy Secretariat at the South African National Energy Development Institute, Professor Sampson Mamphweli.